On the show today, firefighters from several departments have been battling a huge blaze at Tesla's Fremont factory. I've got all the details on that coming up. Also, new BMW i7T, some electric bus news, and why installing EV chargers in new builds could well become the law in this particular part of the US. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Saturday, the 5th of February. My name is Martin Lee, and I go through every EV story so you don't have to. Well, thank you very much for watching today. We'll get onto that big Tesla story in just a second. Some amazing pictures coming out and being tweeted out as well by the fire department. First of all, though, we'll start with some news from BMW blog about the BMW i7. A new teaser video shows the new 7 Series doing some extreme cold weather testing, teasing their full-size sedan with zero emissions for a while now. Of course, big rivals to the Mercedes-Benz EQS. And a clip published by the sub-brand on their Instagram channel shows this i7 in the snow. For a moment, we can see the digital screen with the same graphics as the sister car, the iX. So this will have iDrive 8. No huge surprise, but good confirmation. And big single curved piece of glass to mirror the SUV as well. The driver's display reveals BMW is testing the i7 in the Arctic Circle at minus 34 degrees Celsius. That is minus 29.2 degrees Fahrenheit, says BMW blog. That vehicle will be released by the end of the year, or debuted by the end of the year. Pop a link to that story in the show notes if you'd like to read more. And have a look at the Instagram page of BMW i. They say born electric. Before it can earn a place on the assembly line, it needs to put in a gold star performance in tough Arctic conditions. And again, I'll pop a link to their Instagram channel if you'd like to subscribe, along with about 2.5 million other people. Now, Uber and WALLBOX are rolling out their trial to the rest of the United States, expanding their partnership nationwide following the pilot program, which I told you about recently on this podcast. It provides Uber drivers a discounted package for a WALLBOX Pulsar Plus, that's the charger, installation, and you can even finance the package as well, according to NGT News. A few months after beginning their partnership in the Bay Area last October, they're now expanding their collaboration so that drivers all across the US will soon have access to this charging package. Andrew McDonald is Uber's Senior VP of Mobility and Business Operations and says this, and I quote, "Helping drivers go electric is a crucial part of our plan to get to zero emissions by 2030 in the US. This partnership with WALLBOX helps drivers by making it more affordable and accessible to charge their EVs, and we're excited to give more drivers the chance to take advantage of it." And indeed, my Uber today, I just got home back to the south coast from London, about 2 hours away. I wasn't going to do a podcast today because we thought we were away all weekend, but I got home tonight. And our Uber today was a Hyundai Ioniq. So that driver clearly going electric in London. Didn't talk to him about what his charging setup at home was, but this is great that in the US, this partnership with Uber and WALLBOX is being rolled out to help drivers get the cars and the charging infrastructure. And actually, with Uber as well, they earn an extra $1 on every trip, up to $4,000 annually. Now let's talk about the headline story today, and that is a Tesla factory fire in Fremont, now under investigation as the fire is under control at the time of me recording this podcast. The fire seemed to ignite outside the Tesla plant in Fremont, where it was pallets of cardboard debris going up in flames, according to the fire department of Fremont. The fire led to the department requesting neighboring firefighters to help extinguish the blaze before it got out of control and to knock the fire down. Well, back in March last year, molten aluminium and hydraulic fluid caused a fire in the construction site on the Tesla campus. So not the first time they've had to call the fire department in, according to KTVU.com. And if you look at some of the pictures online that the fire department tweeted out, some of those responders that you can see are wearing Tesla branded firefighting gear, so that would suggest that Tesla have their own internal firefighters. It's not just some guy with a fire extinguisher pulled off the wall to, I don't know, put out a small fire in a waste paper basket or something. This was a serious response from the Fremont Fire Department. A 2-alarm fire I don't know what that phrase is, but it sounds serious. A 2-alarm fire at the factory on Fremont Boulevard, comprising mainly of packing materials and cardboard pallets. Mutual aid had to be requested from Milpitas, is that how I say it? Fire department. No reports of any injuries, and photos of the fire show it's being knocked down. Currently under investigation. Crews separating the smouldering cardboard and dousing the debris with foam, says the tweet from the fire department. Mutual aid also received from Alameda County Fire Department. Those mutual units have now been released, it says. So, look, the first thing here is everyone is safe. Nobody was in any harm, or at least nobody came to any harm. And that's the first thing. Not the first time that we've reported on a fire at that facility. And I think it's only because Tesla is so high profile in that they get their unfair share of negative news. They get their unfair share of positive news as well, but you've got to take the good with the bad. If you want Tesla to be talked about all the time with the amazing things, people are going to get obsessed with the company, and then when there's negative news like this, be talking about it. Huge interest I've seen on social media today. A lot of Tesla fans saying, hey, it's no big deal. It's all out. It's fine. But look, this is a big deal. I think they really dodged a bullet here, because you don't want any incident like this on a site where there are lithium-ion batteries being stored. Because, as you may know, if you're a fan of EVs, watching this podcast, listening to this podcast for many years, we've talked about, done interviews before with battery specialists, how batteries, lithium-ion batteries, are their own perfect, self-contained, self-fueling fire source. They have all the fuel inside them they need. They have the oxygen inside, and to put a single battery out often requires a huge container, shipping container, filled with water. And many fire departments now just pick the car up, just put it in the container and leave it there for 2-3 days. We've seen cases where a car has been in an accident, an unfortunate accident, just a fender bender. And, the recovery truck has turned up and picked the car up, put it on a flatbed or a low loader, taken it to the scrapyard or something like that. And even that movement of the battery can cause a fire, and that can take 2 or 3 days to get under control, and thousands of gallons of water for a single battery. Now, EVs are unbelievably safe. The technology is incredibly safe. But again, a fire at the world's biggest EV maker definitely got the headlines today. Everyone, thankfully, seems fine. And again, I see those accounts on Twitter, like the anti-Tesla lot. They have their own drone flyovers as well. They've been pointing out that site's a mess. And, I mean, I would say I agree with them, but there are elements of that Tesla facility that do look pretty like it's not German precision, right? So they are focused on getting the cars out the door. It looks like they could do with a few neat freaks around Tesla to just kind of, tidy things up. There are some bits of that factory which maybe all car factories have it, but I don't know. There's bits of it that are when you see those big flyover videos of Fremont, certain areas where a lot of rubbish, clearly scrap and all those kind of things, just seem to be thrown rather than sorted. Great news, everyone's fine, and let's hope that this kind of thing never happens again. So let's. Before we move on, there has been, I think, some sensationalism around this story, which I try to avoid on this podcast, as you know. And I found this from what used to be quite a big newspaper in the UK called The Sun, but no one reads it anymore, really. And Tesla, obviously some people have to. I don't know anybody that reads The Sun anymore, but I guess they sell copies. A Tesla factory is on fire in California, and firefighters are battling the massive blaze as shocking footage shows the facility amid the chaos. This is why I don't know anybody that buys The Sun. They say, in the video clip, plumes of smoke are seen rising into the sky as firefighters shoot water onto the blaze. Well, firefighters said it was foam, but there you go. The aerial footage shows firefighters standing on ladders, which it did, dozens of feet in the air, which they were, as they aim to what appears to aim endless amounts of water on the Tesla plant. Yeah, it's that kind of publication, if you didn't know. So, and it made me chuckle, because wasn't that big a deal, let's face it. All right, let's move on. General Motors is staying the course on its installation of 3,500 EV chargers at its work sites in the US and Canada to be installed by 2025, as many of its employees still work remotely, according to the Detroit Free Press today. GM is allowing employees to charge their EVs for free while on the job, and that would encourage EV adoption, they think, as they go all EV at General Motors. But the pandemic escalated and many workers got sent home, and many still haven't returned to the office, and some have part-time, not full-time. And many companies are taking the long-term view that people will get back to the office one day, and when they do, have free charging and people will use them. Now, Flow is the Canadian company which is shipping chargers to GM. They've sent about 500 level 2 chargers and 18 DC fast chargers to the GM facilities in Detroit, Warren and Flint. When GM said it would add 3,500 EV charging stations across its own facilities by the middle of the decade, they'd already installed 918 chargers at that point. And GM's own research shows, even this was in 2020 when they did it, that drivers are 6 times more likely to drive an EV if they can charge at their workplace. And I completely agree. If you can charge at home and at work, an EV is a no-brainer. And if you can't charge at either of those places, still get an EV. There are solutions. But if you can charge when you're at home and when you're at work, there's zero reason not to have an EV. So that's great news. And actually, as an electric, car company, they probably should do this anyway. All right, let's talk about a new law that would require new buildings to have EV charging stations installed. According to AdvantageNews.com, some home builders say it's too soon to require new Illinois buildings to have designated parking spaces for electronic vehicle charging. House Bill 3125, sponsored by Robin Gable, has advanced through the House Energy Environment Committee. The bill would require newly constructed buildings to set aside a certain number of parking spaces with the capability to meet wiring requirements for EVs. And this, by the way, is very sensible. And it's in the story doesn't actually match the headline, which says it would require new buildings to have EV charging stations. New buildings shouldn't have EV charging stations because it's a decision for the car owner to decide what WALLBOX they want, not necessarily the company WALLBOX. So the actual details of this story don't match the headline, and it's very important. Study after study, the 4 years I've been doing this podcast, study after study shows that if you can put in EV charging wiring, and the same goes for PV, by the way, solar installations, at the point of new build or major refurbishment, the incremental costs are marginal on the cost of the project. So the cost of building a new house, apartment block, whatever, the cost of then adding the cabling to be EV ready is marginal and the same goes for major refurbishments as well. Now, the president of the Home Builders Association of Illinois is called Dean Graven, told the Center Square that it's too soon to require specific wiring for mandated EV chargers, Graven said. Many different EV manufacturers are producing EVs, all with distinctive charging requirements. What? Hang on, let me check what that quote said. Many different EV manufacturers are producing electric vehicles, all with distinctive charging requirements. No, they're not. All EVs charge the same. With electricity. Let's continue. At this juncture, mandating that builders install wiring does not make sense, Mr. Graven said. Well, it does. And I could point him to several studies that have been done by, people that build stuff that say put the wiring in now, because that can be the really expensive bit when you try and retrofit. The actual box that goes on the wall is $300, $500, whatever. But it's that, if it's going to be a long way away from putting in near fuse boxes and things like that, that's where the work can get really expensive. Anyway, let's continue. Mr. Graven said, "We have no idea how many amps will be needed," he said. "If we put something in, will it be enough? Will it be too much? They are going to have an electrician come back and change everything out again." What? He's the president of the Home Builders Association of Illinois. What an absolutely bonkers thing to say. We have no idea how many amps will be needed. We do. The other side of this wall, I've got a 240 volt, 32 amp circuit, and that'll charge my car at 7 point something kilowatts. And that's all you'll ever need. You know, maybe I should tell Mr. Graven about this amazing invention. Some Americans have it already, but maybe you'll get one day. It's this box that you can put wet clothes in, and it spins round, and it'll make those clothes dry. It kind of tumbles. Some people call it a tumble dryer. And many American homes, I don't know, have a separate electrical connection for that. Like, that's not up for debate, right? It's a 240 volt connection. So when you say you don't know what wiring to put in, I'm a Brit with no knowledge of the electrical system in America. And even I would say, here's your starter idea. Stick in a 50 amp, 240 volt cable, ready for a NEMA 1450. Bob's your uncle. Everyone's a winner. Let me continue. The situation reminds Mr. Graven of the 1980s when VHS and Betamax were duking it out to be the dominant video recorder. What will the car market look like in 15 years, he said. No one knows. Oh, God. So he's saying, let's not do something today that we know what to do. Let's wait 15 years. Okay. Well, look, I don't know if he's the best person to be the head of president of the Home Builders Association of Illinois. But let's have somebody in that position. Let's not wait 15 years in case there's somebody better than him coming along. And I suspect there may be one day. Give him the job today because... Anyway, let's continue. I don't want to get on his case. He says, no one knows. Toyota is one of the biggest vehicle... here we go. Toyota is one of the largest vehicle manufacturers in the world, he said. And they've said that they are prioritizing hydrogen cell technology over electric. Hydrogen is the one element in the universe that there is more of than anything else, Mr. Graven said. Oh, God. So, look, a couple of things are happening here. Three options, I think. Firstly, he's an idiot, and I don't think that's the case, and I don't think anyone's an idiot. I mean, he can tie his shoelaces and put his shoes on the right foot, so he's not an idiot. Or he's funded by the fossil fuel industry, and there's big forces at play. There's a lot of money going around various places, and you don't know who's paying for what. So that's another option. Or this poor chap is just massively misinformed, and people like him in a position of helping to guide policy just need to be helped along the way. And he's probably read one thing in a newspaper that said, oh, hydrogen's coming, that's going to be the future. Or his, crazy uncle. Everyone's got a crazy uncle on Facebook. The kind of guy that's... on his third beer by midday. And he posted on social media once, hydrogen's the future! So he's probably just misinformed. We just need to... that's what the point of this podcast is to try and help people sift through what's out there. So, I hope that's just a case of, he read one thing and then a newspaper called him and was like, give us a quote on this, and what do you think about installing... Look, putting in the cabling at the point of construction is proven time and time and time again to be the most cost-effective way, so that when EVs are not just 1 to 2% of the US market, but 100%, that it's not a costly retrofit, and it's such a minimal cost to do it, or when you're refurbishing. I will probably reach out to that organisation and send some articles, and I'll probably never hear anything back. Let's move on. Coming up on the podcast very soon, we're going to be talking about electric bus operators and how they are becoming more popular around the world, and how Hawaiian tax changes could hurt EV drivers. Stick around. Those stories are on the way. Now, here's a much better bit of news. Virginia lawmakers may not agree on much in a divided General Assembly, but Democrats and Republicans think the same when it comes to standing up for the parking rights of drivers with EVs, says the Greater Washington website. One of the first bills to pass both legislative chambers this year is a new traffic infraction that fines drivers caught parking their combustion car or their truck in a spot designated for EV charging. This article says proponents of the law which puts law enforcement power behind the signs designating parking spots as EV only, is a common sense step that would protect the investments of property owners who install the expensive charging infrastructure. The proposal might appear uncomplicated, but legislators have been wrestling with the question of what do you do about an EV that's at 100% fully charged and hasn't moved on. At the minute, they haven't specifically addressed that issue. I hope common sense will prevail and that people do generally the right thing. Everyone has an emergency or can't get back to the car, or there's a big queue at the checkout, and some people are generally inconsiderate. I find most people are good with EVs still, as more people get them, and they generally don't just block a charger. So yes, Virginia, yes, well done. A new law that when somebody parks in a charging space, it's a $250 ticket. Thank you very much. Let's now talk about EV buses. And Israel has ordered all the bus operators in the country to buy only electric buses. From 2026, Ministry of Environmental Protection announcing targets as well between now and then. By 2024, a third of all the buses have to be zero emissions. By the middle of the decade, half of all the new buses have to be zero emissions. I'll pop a link to Electrive in the show notes so you can read more. And from there, let's go to Kenya, where the EV share is about 5%, majority of course being private vehicles, but public vehicles are getting in on the act as well. And the new bus rapid transit network is going to be, you guessed it, all electric. It's a new public transport system delivering, they say, new fast and comfortable buses, and they're going to have dedicated lanes, a right of way that makes them faster than fossil fueled buses. And in Africa, according to TECHCRUNCH.com, e-mobility is growing but at a slower rate than some places because of challenges like a weaker electric grid, insufficient charging infrastructure, and lack of awareness as well. I'm not sure how many African viewers and listeners I have on this podcast, but I'll look at the stats. Now, let's talk about EV owners in Hawaii saying that a new law or tax change really could single them out, according to KITV.com. EV owners may be hit with a new tax if this new bill passes the state Senate. The Hawaii Department of Transportation proposing a per-mile tax that raises funds for highway repair. The DOT saying that the per-mile tax replaces the EV owner's registration surcharge, and saying that it's about equity, and those people who pay fuel tax at the moment and won't be in the future when they drive an EV are contributing to keeping the roads. You kind of got to agree with that, actually. I mean, I don't pay any road tax here because they don't have it on EVs, and that's going to leave a massive hole in the budgets over here as well. And I think paying per mile that you drive is probably the fairest way to keep on raising those funds from drivers. Not that I'll like it very much, but it's probably the fairest. If you can think of a better way, let me know. Now let's talk about details on the new Chinese BYD. The Han EV have been leaked, according to PANDAILY. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology on January 30th released its latest batch of new vehicle models that are exempt from purchase taxes. And the BYD Han has increased its range from 605 kilometers to 715 kilometers. And on January 3rd, BYD announcing its sales volumes for December. They sold 13,701 vehicles in the last month of the year, 117,000 vehicles for the whole year. And the BYD Han was just over 10% of all the vehicles they sold. Moving on, and the Hyundai Ioniq Electric has the most reliable pass rate of our MOT system. Recent data from here in the UK showing the Ioniq Electric, not the new Ioniq 5, but the original Hyundai that bore the Ioniq name, has the best MOT record. The MOT is the annual inspection, vehicle inspection that we have after the first 3 years. New cars don't have it, but then it's an annual thing that you have to make your vehicle roadworthy. Analysis showed that the Ioniq Electric has a pass rate of 98.75%, above the UK average of 87%. Other vehicles that did well were the Nissan Leaf with a 97.7% pass rate. Next, and we'll talk about Scania and commercial vehicles delivering a solution like 5 battery electric trucks and 1.6 megawatts of charging equipment to the Swedish company Falkenklev, a logistics company, as part of their hauliers' vision of a 22-vehicle all-EV fleet at their Malmö depot. The site, which will be expanded up to 40 vehicles simultaneously, will become Sweden's largest truck charging station when it opens this year. And the system is built on smart technology that can supply energy based on the number of vehicles charging simultaneously, according to this press release from Scania. Now, Falkenklev has commissioned a solar project as well, a 1.5 hectare solar park and a 2 megawatt battery as part of their state-of-the-art energy hub. And a final quick one, if you are looking for something to watch this weekend, check out the new video from Asian Petrolhead. It's a great channel that he has, and this time he's driving the Genesis G80. Now, when I first saw the Genesis G80, the way that Genesis, of course part of Hyundai, Kia, build this car is they call it the electrified G80. Now, you know car companies use the word electrified when they're trying to hide something because it's got a battery or it's hybrid or it's trying to just use the electric word when it's not. It's an all-electric car. Just call it the electric G80. And I don't know why they've used that word electrified. It's silly. It's the electric G80. It is, for all intents and purposes, the G80, a big luxury cruiser that doesn't look like an EV, but it has a big old battery, 87.2 kilowatt hours. It'll do 310 miles or 500 kilometers. Dual motor, not the eGMP platform that the Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, the Genesis GV60 is on. But it's still an 800-volt system. It still charges 10 to 80% in 22 minutes. It's still got vehicle-to-load functionality, so you can get juice out of the car. 3.6 kilowatts, by the way. Really good video. It's really snowy in South Korea when he's testing it. And normally he is absolutely rinsing these cars that he tests. I mean, on public roads as well. It's like, all right. But he can't because it's snowy, which is also interesting because he's talking about how to drive EVs in very heavy snowy conditions. Go check it out. It's an interesting one to watch this weekend. And that is my recommendation. Well, thank you so much for watching EV News Daily today. Hopefully your weekend is going all right, whatever you're up to. Let me know what you think of any of today's stories. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you agree with me, disagree with me, it's all right. We can think differently and still be friends. It's the great thing about talking to adults on the internet rather than, just being on Twitter all the time where everyone's shouting at each other. So let me know your thoughts on today's stories, and I might learn something from you as well. Please leave some feedback in the comments down there. And if you liked the video, do that so I know to make more like it. And if you want to check out the audio version of this podcast, you should. And you can get me in your ears on your favourite podcast platform. And if you want to check out the Patreon page, it's how we put this show on the air every day. People, individuals, companies, organisations support this podcast through Patreon. And it pays the bills, and it puts this show on the air pretty much 7 days a week if I'm around. Check it out, patreon.com/EVNewsDaily. But you haven't got to. I'll do it anyway, either way. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.